Jury selection begins today for Steve Bannon's contempt of Congress trial. The former Trump advisor has refused for months to cooperate with a subpoena from the January 6th committee. In a hearing last week, the judge ruled against several defenses from Bannon's legal team. It led to his lawyer asking the judge, what's the point to going to trial if there are no defenses? The judge agreed and suggested Bannon's team consider that. In a recent podcast, Bannon was defiant about his potential legal troubles, saying, quote, pray for our enemies because we're going medieval on these people. We're going to savage our enemies.
Oh, my God.
He went on to say, so quote, tired. Who needs prayers? Certainly not Stephen K. Bannon.
Medieval.
Oh, my. Legal experts expect this to be a quick trial, with Bannon facing long odds of acquittal. The 2 contempt counts he's facing carry anywhere from 30 days to a year in prison.
Let's bring right on MSNBC legal contributor Charles Coleman. Charles, perhaps the headline of the weekend is Bannon says he's going medieval during his trial. The judge says, meh.
Joe, I can't think of any reason or any manner or pathway that Steve Bannon has to an acquittal here. And one of the reasons I say that is because the judge in this case, Judge Nichols, district judge in D.C., made it so clear that any of the defenses that Bannon was going to try to advance were not going to be offered and applied in front of the jury. And one of those defenses, the last-ditch effort that he made, you may recall, was that he agreed that he was going to sit before the January 6th committee and testify, which is ultimately what he's being held in contempt about in the first place. The problem is you can't do that now and then think that that's going to somehow relieve you of what your obligations were during the investigative phase. And that's the issue that he's facing. He can't get around it. The biggest element that the government has to prove is intent, which is something that they can do in a very straightforward manner. And so he doesn't really have a path to a win here. So I'm not sure how medieval or where medieval he intends to go, but this is going nowhere fast.
Yeah. So, John Heilman, what are your thoughts about Bannon? You and I have actually both known him from a distance since the Jeffrey Quatnitz days of the 1990s. I think he worked for Quatnitz in the 90s. But he's become a figure that has, of course, fired by Trump. I guess he was fired by Trump. He certainly was out of Trump's graces, and he reemerges and actually, I think he gives some of the most damning evidence against Trump that January 6th was planned. And he's telling everybody on his podcast on January 5th exactly what's going to happen the next day. So where does Bannon fit in all of this stuff?
Well, I think, first of all, Joe, that he's obviously been like watching, Pulp Fiction in a loop too often. That medieval thing is straight out of the movies. You also will always worry about anybody. It's bad when you start talking about yourself in the third person. It's particularly bad when you start talking about yourself in the third person and citing your middle initial. That's always a sign of a particular kind of grandiosity that's kind of out of control. But look, he is. I've interviewed the guy. You and I, you say have known him in some way for a long time, but I interviewed him on the circus in October of 2020. On the night of the first presidential debate. And at that point, it was clear that he had been spending a lot of time thinking through exactly the scenario that played out. And, there's now this leaked audio where he said some things that were very similar to what we were talking about then, which was that, what would Trump do if Biden won the election, how Trump would then claim that the election was stolen, and he would take it and take it into legal fights and political fights, what Bannon kept calling the counting rooms. And his confidence and the way he and Rudy were thinking about things was that the political power of the Republican Party in the states, that they controlled the courts, that they controlled the state legislatures, that would ultimately mean that Trump would end up being able to take the White House, even though he'd lost on election day. And, it's sort of chilling to go back and watch some of that tape. Because he was sort of making very clear, and you're now seeing the fact that you're now seeing a lot of that kind of come out. I think, he would be. I'm not sure how much new he has to tell the 1-6 committee, but if they could get him in front of them, in the proper circumstances, not under the circumstances that Bannon is trying to lay out where he's in control, I think he has a lot to say contextually and probably some details that would be really valuable for the public and for the committee to hear.